good morning. Glad to see you all. I'm Josh. Love to meet you sometime soon. Really, that was fun. I love seeing all these kiddos in here. So if you're new with us or haven't been with us last couple of weeks, we teach in what's called a series. That just means it takes more than 1 week to cover. And we've been kind of walking through the series on growing up. And kind of the premise is this. All of us, as we're adults, had these hopes and dreams and kind of goals that we wanted to accomplish in our life. And we imagined those when we were in elementary school and middle school and high school and on through college. Some of you did what I did, which is you wrote your goals out and put them in a bottle and you buried them in the backyard and couldn't wait to see what 10 years later it looks like. And the reality for, I would say all of us, is one of two things. Those hopes and dreams that we wished of, we did actually get to see fulfilled. A lot of us had that experience. Others of us, we actually got to experience and the fulfillment of all those hopes and dreams we had. And then we discovered it still wasn't enough. So on one side, there's lots of us who go, hey, we have these dreams, and the reality of what my life looks like now is nothing like what I had dreamt about. And for others, we go, well, we kind of sketched it out pretty good, charted our path, and yet here we are in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and something still seems amiss. And the reality for all of us, and it's nice, you don't be a Christian, you can be a non-Christian, to kind of have this experience, is that for all of us in this room, there is this desire of who we want to be and the reality of who we are. And those are different. There is a gap between the people we want to be, the mom or dad or grandparent we want to be known as, and the reality of what's going on in our life. And one of the things that happens is we all think that's just us and we want to hide it and protect it and hope no one ever finds out all of our deep, dark secrets and nobody finds out how we don't feel as fulfilled as we think we should be, all those things. And so you think that it's just you. And so one of the neat things of getting forward to people in a room is that we can all just kind of come to the same agreement here, is that it's not one of you that's messed up, it's all of us that's messed up. All of us. All of us have these empty pockets in our life that we're going, something's just not right. Something's just not right. So foundationally, where we all get to start today is just that acknowledgement that there is something off in our family, in our world, in our own lives, in our own souls. And so we've been trying to go, okay, what is that? What's that gap between the person we want to be known as and the reality of who we are? And how do we fill that gap? And what we've kind of discovered over the last couple of weeks is you're not actually capable of filling that gap, or fixing that gap, or being the solution to your problems. Hence the reason for this worldview that we would say is Christianity, this belief that we actually can't fix ourselves. And you go, I don't know about that. I still think I can. And yet, the more you try, the more difficult that becomes. And so here's what I'll say. If that's still you on your journey, no judgment. We've all been there. Just know that this will always be a place that when you fall, we'll be happy to pick you up and walk alongside you and admit our own failures and our own flaws and go, yep, that's why we think there is a God who has to redeem us and make things whole for us. And that's why we think there should be a community of people who kind of understand that and keep coming back. If you fall in the ditch, we'll get in the ditch with you and we'll help you get out of it. And when we fall in the ditch, we hope you get in the ditch with us and help us get out of it. And so that's actually kind of the purpose of the church and its experience. And so that's kind of what we've been working through. Now, if you're going, all that stuff's weird, I don't believe in that stuff. If it's to be, it's up to me. My only problem is I just sometimes do the wrong thing, but I can fix that. I don't really understand this need for Jesus or a Savior or any of those kind of weird things. Religion's just silly. I'm here because my spouse, my parent, whatever wants to be here, and I just go, I'm so glad you're here. I'm not going to talk at you. I'm not going to try to persuade you or manipulate you in any way. But can we all at least start foundationally here? Everybody in the room. Could we admit that there is something really broken in our world? This is, in the last 3 weeks, I will have opened this sermon 2 times talking about mass shootings. Yeah. I mean, our world is just messy. And you know what happens? It's really interesting is, and I do this every time I get caught into it and caught up in it, and a lot of people do, is what happens is something horrific happens in our world as a result of a human, maybe one, maybe a group, some kind of group movement, or maybe just one individual who has so much hate or anger or brokenness in their life, they literally go into a place and decide to take other people's lives. Now, it's a little uncomfortable to talk about and trying to figure out, and going, oh gosh, my kids are here, and we'll be very respectful of those things. And yet, we do have to come to some kind of agreement that our world isn't gotten better on this issue. In fact, if you're an American, you have all sorts of opinions on guns. whether or not we should have them and whether or not we shouldn't have them, whether or not they're part of the culprit. And you have some people that go, yeah, they are. Others go, no, it's the individuals. We're going, okay, maybe it's a little bit of both. How do we figure it out? And this is apolitical. I'm not trying to talk to you about either side of the politics here. Personal opinion, just kind of on the side, is I don't think we can legislate change. I actually don't think there's anything we can personally do to change our world from the telling people how to behave. I think it's so much more broken and so much deeper than that. The solution to the brokenness of our world is Jesus and His church. And so I would go, hey, instead of arguing about politics, can't we just be who God's called us to be and love people the way God's called us to love them and care for those people and spend our time and energy there instead of the arguments back and forth across the aisle? Now, that's a different conversation to be had later. And you still go, that's true, but that doesn't fix it either. And so we have all this stuff we're trying to work through. And so what happens is that after the next mass shooting, which is what continues to happen, then when we identify the culprit, right? You identify the culprit. After you identify the culprit, or at least I do, I now investigate everything about their life. If you have noticed, the media does it. They go to their Facebook pages, they find their YouTube channels, and they find everything that they can on that individual. Right? They find out their upbringing, they figure out who their parents are, they figure out what video games they play, they figure out what school they went to, they talk to their teachers, they talk to their neighbors, they talk to their classmates, right? So, and there's kind of this, kind of two things that happen. Some people go, never saw that coming. Others will go, yep, I could have told you it was going to happen. In fact, I warned people about it. And yet, regardless what we do is we go, okay, there's something broken in here, and then we go and we investigate the human being who participates or does those things. You ever thought about why we do that? Like, we have to know about their life, right? We have to know what happened. Do you not understand that the bad thing already happened? And the majority of the time, that person no longer is even living, so it's not like you're trying to protect them from that person anymore. Have you ever thought about why we spend so much time and energy trying to investigate that person's life? Here's one. Because we're going, we got to understand this. There's something so broken in this individual, we got to know what it was so we can fix it. Right? We got to figure out what went wrong in society, what went wrong in that person, and we think something psychologically broke down in that individual, and that's what led them to this thing. Maybe it was their upbringing, maybe it was some kind of chemical imbalance, maybe it was some kind of mental illness, whatever it is, we define it, and then we go, okay, let's figure out how we can figure out what this is so we can stop it. Right now, for hundreds of years, people have been trying to figure this out. We've come up with government systems that we thought would fix that, like Marxism. And then we realize systems like that don't actually make that better. It actually exacerbates it and makes it worse. And then you look at the history of our world. You go, how in the world did the Holocaust happen? How did people get so angry that they could fly a plane into a building? And we have to figure out all this stuff, and we go, okay, maybe it's that individual, maybe it's radicalism, or whatever it is. At some point, as human beings, could we admit that it's greater than one individual and one broken brain or one messy idealism or ideology? And that it is a bigger wave and a bigger problem, and it actually keeps us up at night, and no matter how much we try to investigate and figure it out, we can't actually explain it very well. Which is really hard for us Westerners. By that I mean, not people who live in America and the Western side of the world with Western ideas and understanding, particularly as it comes to, modernity and postmodernity and all the different ways by which the world works and trying to explain it. And we believe that there is an explanation for everything. There's a cause for every effect. So we spend all of our time and energy trying to figure out what that cause is, and we just think that there is some explanation to all things, and usually we would go, it has to do with an individual, it has to do with their brain, the end. Could we actually call that stuff what it is? And it's evil. It's evil. It's not just hate. It's hate plus evil, and we go, and can we actually start having real conversations about where does evil come from? Where does evil come from? Is it something that you're taught? Is it something you learn, or is it greater than that? And you see, in the Western world, we think it's just, okay, there's something bad, this individual, let's point to it. There can't be any greater force than that, which is interesting because in most other cultures, Africa, Asia, even Caribbean culture, they actually believe that there is a force that's supernatural, greater than what we see in just our landscape. Cause effect. They actually think there's something underwriting the brokenness of humanity, and they would define it as evil, and they would define kind of a leader of the evil, whether you use the word devil, whether you use the word Satan, that there actually is something out there that's greater than what's going on. And as we look at our world and try to figure it out, the reality is there is no better explanation to what we experience and how horrific the world is than actually put a name on an evil and declare it as someone who leads that regime, which is overwhelming and complicated, and it sounds a little dogmatic. And it's hard for our modern American culture to go, no, we can't do that, right? But if you believe that, there can't be an enemy, there can't be anything bad, can we just admit that maybe in our belief system that we're so educated, and our beliefs are so evolved, that maybe we could be off here? That maybe our culture isn't defining this the right way, and maybe some other cultures do a better job of defining it? Maybe it's us who's being simplistic and not other cultures. Maybe it's us who's being uneducated and not other cultures. And so what we're going to kind of look at today is this reality that there actually could be evil. And here's the problem. When we start talking about evil, a couple things happen. Some of us just discount and go, no, it's just individual. Let's fix that individual. Tell them that's them. Put them in, insane asylums or whatever it is. We can just separate individuals. Everything will be okay. We've tried that for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years, and that hasn't been there. The other side of it is some of you are going, yes, finally we're talking about this. I've been wanting the church to talk about this for months or years. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about there's an evil one who wants to destroy all things. And then for some of us, we get so hyper-focused on that. That means there's the devil underneath every rock. Now we're going to lose sleep because we've talked about it. No, that's not the goal here either. So we're not going to fixate on this, but we're going to spend a little time trying to figure out where it fits into this realm and see what scriptures have to say. And so that's a pretty harsh opening, I understand that. And so last thing I'll say about this, if you'll stay dialed in, I promise you won't have nightmares. I promise this won't be one of those things that your kids won't sleep, you won't sleep. If you'll just stay dialed in for a few minutes. By that I mean about 30 more. 35 probably. Maybe 40. It's how many times I stop and say those things, right? You'll stay dialed in, I promise. You'll have a better understanding of how our world works. You'll have a better understanding of what we can do about it, and you will actually breathe deeper and sleep better as a result. And so, not always puppies and rainbows, but this does have a bow on it, and it would be helpful for us. And if you're not a Christian, here's one thing that this is going to help you understand this Christian worldview, and actually give you a pretty good argument, and I'm trying to convince you, but give you a pretty good argument to why there's a God and how he exists. And so that's what we're going to work through today. Now, the reason we're talking about this in the middle of this series is because Paul wrote several books. Paul is a writer of the New Testament. He wrote about 2/3 of the letters there. If you don't know anything about Paul, don't know anything about the Bible, basically the Bible split up in Old Testament, New Testament. Old Testament, kind of how Gary was talking about baptism. Old Testament point to a Savior and point to the time that there's going to be a Savior that's going to come and save the world. So basically the whole kind of summary of the Old Testament is people are more broken than they admit, and finally when they admit it, they realize they can't fix themselves, so what they do every time is they cry out to the creator of the universe and say, God, will you save us? Kind of the roller coaster. I'll choose my own life, mess it up, God, will you save us? God comes in and saves us. They do it again, God comes in and saves us. This is kind of this roller coaster. But every time God would come in and intervene on behalf of his people, he would say, here is what you should do now, but let me point you to a greater solution. What we're going to do now is a Band-Aid, some kind of sacrifice, but we're going to point to something that's greater than a Band-Aid, and it's kind of a vaccine. It's going to solve all the problems. And so the Old Testament's all pointing to the fact that God was going to fix all of the humans' problems. Evil, brokenness. And he was going to fix it through actually himself stepping onto this planet as Jesus. So Jesus, who is God, who is the Son of God, all the Old Testament points to the fact that he's going to show up and save us. Now the New Testament is all pointing back to the fact that Jesus actually did what he said he was going to do. He showed up, he saved us, and he made all things new, he made all things available to us. And so the first 4 books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are just biographies about Jesus and his life. And then the latter books talk about the history of the first century church. Then the rest of them are kind of letters where people are, church leaders are writing to the church to help them understand how people should live. And one of the really great letters is called the book of Ephesians. It's Paul, one of the church leaders from the first century, a church planner, kind of a spiritual father for lots of people. He would start churches, he'd move to a new town, then he'd start writing letters back to the old town to make sure they kind of stayed on track. And one of the letters is Ephesians, is the book to the church at Ephesus. And the reason we're talking about this one today is this book, Ephesus, Ephesians, is kind of primarily, as Paul writes to this church, telling them how to grow up. Literally helping them understand how to grow up. Some of the arguments are you grow up with other people, you have to do it in community, and there's a couple things that happen. As you do it in community, you use your gifts that God gives you, and you become, in community, unified. And as you become unified, you can read this in Ephesians 4, you mature. So there's actually this simple thing where the church says, get together. Paul says, get together, use your gifts with one another. As you do that, you'll be unified. As you do that over a period of time, you will start maturing. So one thing that's really neat, one of the reasons we argue so heavily here for small groups is, while we really love you sitting in a row and hearing these messages each week, the reality is if you really, really do want to grow up, it doesn't happen in a row, it happens in a circle. And so Paul writes this and argues heavily and goes, you got to use your gifts in community so that you will be unified, and as you are unified, the body is strengthened and you actually mature. So he uses arguments like the body, and he's like, hey, if you got a broke arm, you got to fix that arm so the whole body will be better, right? And so there's this letter that starts with, hey, you should be unified, use your gifts, be in community. As you stay in community, you will become more unified, and then you will mature and end up being the people that you ever always longed to be. So kind of a commercial going. As we talk about this series, there's some really good next steps, but the reality is if you really want to grow up, you've got to actually get out of these rows and into circles, and that's a little harder. And I would just offer, if you're not quite ready for that, here's what I would request of you. Would you just show back up here on Wednesday night? You can show up here at 5:30. We'll feed you. Your kiddos will have, if you have kids, they can go to kids ministry or student ministry, all sorts of fun stuff going on. And you can get to know some people. You can go to Bible class, learn some more about the Bible, or you can hang out in the lobby and play some games with new people. There's all sorts of options for you as you go, hey, there's actually something about us getting connected that's going to help us. So Paul makes that argument. And at the very end of this letter, he then kind of gives a disclaimer of what's going to be the biggest obstacle to our growing up. So if you've been in the last couple of weeks, you're going, okay, I gotta offer my body as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing, for that's my spiritual act of worship. Okay, God, I give you my life, I trust you, and then I'll not conform any longer to the patterns of this world. So kind of step one is, can we just admit that God's got to fix us and God's got to grow us up? We actually can't do it on our own, right? And so we began to discuss that idea pretty heavily, and then we looked last week at the fruit of the Spirit and go, yeah, those are things that God does in us. So our focus is, how do we love the Lord our God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength? So first, let's give our lives to God. Let's ask Jesus to change us, and then let's let Him actually slowly mature us as we love ourselves and love other people. And so that's kind of been the premise, and now week 3 is going, okay, let's actually identify the things that stand in the way of it. Now Paul, at the end of this letter, is going to very clearly identify the things that stand in the way of it, and it actually goes with what's going on in our culture right now. And so let me read this to you. This is Ephesians chapter 6. I'm going to begin in verse 10. I'm reading from the NIV. If you draw the Bible, great. You can turn to it. If not, it'll be up here on the screens. And this is what Paul says. Finally, as he's talking about growing up, finally, be strong in the Lord and in His mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. So Paul's going to go, okay, finally, it's going to get hard. It's not going to be easy. And what you're going to do is you're going to stand firm and be strong, not in your power, but in God's power. Same premise we've been talking about. You actually can't fix you, but you can stand in God's power so that you can put on the full armor of God. You know, the armor belongs to God. And here's just a quick disclaimer. I hate this passage. I really do. Not because of the evil parts or the spiritual parts. It's because I grew up in church. It's because I went to VBS every year. I went to Sunday school. And when I think about this armor of God, I literally can remember Sunday school teachers having me like put on this fake armor, right? Put on this like a knight's costume and talk about armor of God and here's God, He's going to protect me. And I don't really do good with the soldier imagery and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember it just feeling so hokey. Just feeling so hokey, all this stuff. And going, okay, I got to put on my breastplate of righteousness. I go, oh, breastplate, that's funny, right? You got all those things going on. And so this has not been a passage that I've found a lot of comfort in. And some of you probably are there going, oh, here we're going to talk about more of that Sunday school stuff. Stay with me. It'll be worth your time. And if you're brand new to this, you probably don't have any of those those preconditions in you, so it won't bother you as much. And so, but Paul's going to say here is finally be strong, you know, not in your own power, but in the Lord's power. You're going to armor yourself. You're going to protect yourself. You're going to cover yourself so that you very clearly can stand against the devil's schemes. So he literally goes, here's the deal. You're going to have to arm yourself as you grow up, as we change our world. You're going to have to arm yourself because there actually is schemes against you. That word schemes there is the Greek word methodia, which you would guess is where we get the word method. So this literally, it can be defined as scheme, method, or strategy. So literally Paul's going, there is an evil one who really doesn't want you to succeed. Now let me be blunt here, and this is going to get a little hokey if you're not into this stuff. There is an enemy who hates you. Hates you. Hates your marriage. Hates every time you succeed. You know how you've growing up, maybe you had this, I definitely did, a little bit of malice in your heart where someone else would get the thing you wanted or they'd win the award you wanted. You know how you felt? Before you kind of grew up, right? As you're growing up. That's how the enemy feels about every single time you smile. There's so much darkness and hatred in him that he wants you to fail. And then you're going, see, I can't think about that. That's so weird. Now you're going to explain to me that everything's the devil. No, I'm not saying that at all. Okay? We're not going to go to that extreme where every behavior we do is the devil's fault. Sometimes you should just shut your mouth. The devil did not make you say that. Right? So we're not going to blame everything on the devil, and yet at the same time we're not going to go to the other side and pretend like the devil doesn't exist, or there is no evil. And here's the thing I just explained. You know, you're going, I think both my spouse and I really want to have a good marriage. But it is so hard. And you go, why is it so hard? If both of us want to love each other, both of us want to be on the same page, and yet every day there's this wrestle against that. And I go, because the devil hates marriage. The devil hates marriage. And you're at war in your marriage against someone who hates you and hates anything good in your life. You're going, well, I don't know what happened with my kiddo. We loved them well, we guarded their heart, we did all those things, and yet they just kind of grew up and went astray. And I go, yeah, there is an enemy who has methods and strategy to thwart things. You go, see, I just can't believe that. And go, okay, can't we just pause for a second and look at our world? And go, there is something greater going on here than just what meets the eye. Okay, if you don't want to look at the world, can we have the courage to look into our own heart and go, there's something in me that does the wrong thing when I really want to do the right thing. There's sometimes I do things that I know will hurt me or my family. And yet, for some reason, I do them. That's not a Christian thing. That's not a non-Christian thing. That's a people thing, right? There is an enemy who has these methods and these strategies to stop you from maturing and growing up. And so Paul goes, finally, be strong in the Lord. Like, this isn't your strength. This is God's strength and in His mighty power. So let's tell you what to do. You got to put on this full armor of God. Now, he's not going to describe in a second this armor, which is kind of weird to us, but they would have been to that first century and Roman soldiers and kind of what they wore. So he's going to use this analogy of what Roman soldiers wore. Now, there's some funny things to think about here. And going, as Paul's writing this, he's probably in prison. And as he's writing this, he's probably looking right through the prison doors, and he's seeing these soldiers. Right? So he's literally seeing these things right in front of him in terms of the way that the armor looks. So he's going to describe some of that. But before he does, he says, let me tell you about the devil's schemes, and then he defines this enemy at a greater level. And this is what he says, verse 12. For our struggle. That word struggle there's a couple different ways that the word struggle shows up in the scriptures. This Greek word literally means hand-to-hand combat. It means wrestling with your hands. So I don't know, if you're a boy, you have this experience, especially if you had brothers. But I just think it happens for all kids, all boys. They somehow, when they get around each other, they have to touch each other and pull each other's hair and fight each other, right? And so I just remember growing up, and we just wrestle and fight. And I wasn't much of a fighter. I didn't get in a lot of fights, not because I was nice, it's because I was scared. I was scared. I thought I had a good nose, and I didn't want to mess that up. Then in my late teens, I ran into a glass door that I thought was a wall, that I thought was an opening, and jacked my nose all up anyway. I guess I should have just fought more growing up. I was trying to protect this thing, you know? So I didn't really do the fighting, but if you wrestle or you're doing those things, especially if you're a wrestler, you know, or even if Ultimate Fighter, UFC, all that kind of stuff, again, I'm not tough and barbaric. I don't, the octagon to me, love that. And it's I love seeing people bleed. I don't necessarily like that. But if you know this, the rounds, they're short. They're 5 minutes, right? You go, they should fight longer. And the reality is, at that kind of level of extreme fighting, 5 minutes, at the end of those 4 or 5 minutes, these guys are exhausted. Right? When you are fighting at that kind of level, no matter what kind of shape you're in, you are exhausted. And that's the term that Paul's using here in terms of struggling. He's going, it is like hand to hand combat. You struggle. Your struggle is not against flesh and blood. So there literally is a war. And this is where I go, this is why you should read your Bibles. If you're not a Christian, can't we just admit there are times in life that it feels like you are struggling? Your marriage is struggling. You and your kids' relationship, it's a mess. Your work is hard. You're going, why in the world is it so hard? It's going, there is actually something going here. Your struggle is not against flesh and blood. And then Paul actually explains who your struggle's against. Now watch this. He says, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So here's what he's saying. And again, stay with me, because this is where you get nightmares, right? He's going, there's something at play here that's greater than what you see in front of your face in a different realm, in a different world. And this is actually pretty neat, because as scientists continue to figure out more planes and more dimensions and more things, even the greatest scientific minds, where we've been told that science disproves God, just the opposite's happening, right? The greatest minds are going, there's actually planes and dimensions out there that are greater than what we can see at play. Now that's what science is defining for you. And so Paul's saying, there is something going on that you can't see that is still a struggle to fight for you. Have you ever had that experience with your kiddos where all of a sudden they're just screaming and yelling? You know, what's going on with you? Are you tired? Did you eat too much sugar? And we have to find a reason to explain their behavior. Or sometimes you just get really, really short and snappy. There are days that you just wake up and you don't enjoy life as much as you did the day before. And you go, I drink too much caffeine, did I not get enough sleep? And we got to figure out a reason for it, because we got to explain our behavior. You're going, but there's something off with me today. Why am I short? Why am I not nice to my spouse? Why do I act that way to my customers? And what Paul is saying is there is actually something at play, and he defines it with some really powerful terms. Against the rulers, authorities, powers of this dark world, and spiritual forces of evil. So you go, okay, do all those mean something else? He's going, no, what Paul's doing here is he's putting real legitimate names to our struggle. He's going, let me tell you the might of what you're facing. So there literally is a realm that we're facing, and these are powerful sources. There are authorities in this deal. Again, it sounds really scary, but I go, can we pause for a second and admit there's something off in our world? This is what I love about the Christian worldview, is it actually helps you understand what's at play here and why our world is so broken, and why people can do that to a child, or why people can walk into a theater or into a bar with a gun. There's something at play here. And our battle is not against flesh and blood. It is not you versus your spouse, you versus your neighbor, you versus your enemy, you versus your coworker. No. There is something at play that's greater than all those things. So as we think through this, and I am indebted to Tim Keller, I was a pastor of Redeemer Church, for some of this thoughts. These are not original thoughts. As he thinks about this passage, he says there's three things we got to define, and that's what we're going to do in the next 15 minutes. And here's what they are. He says, in any war, any battle, first you got to figure out who your enemy is. Right? So you got to figure out who your enemy is, so we're going to spend a little time trying to figure out who our enemy is. Then after that, after you figure out who your enemy is, who you're fighting, you got to figure out their tactics. How do they fight? Always what you do in a war, first thing is let's figure out who we're fighting. Then let's figure out their methods of attack, their strategies, their methods. Let's figure out how they're going to attack us. And then third, let's figure out our defense and the way that we fight back. So over the next few verses, Paul's really going to help us understand these things. So first we're going to figure out who we're fighting. Then we're going to figure out how they fight, and then how do we defend. So Paul first says, here is what you're fighting. And it's this heavenly realm of spiritual forces. Now, let me describe that in terms of what the scriptures tell you. This person has a name. His name is Satan, or the devil. And you might be familiar with the word devil. It comes from the word diablo, right? Which is how we get the word diabolical. So this is a word you might be familiar with, but it literally means liar or slanderer. So when we think about this enemy, what he does is he misleads us. He lies to us. He tells you things that aren't true about yourself and about other people. And he slanders you and other people. His job, his motive is to actually destroy our value. That's what he does, right? So that word Diablo literally means that. The word Satan, another term we use here, literally means adversary. This is the enemy. And got some scriptures you can read about this. I'm not going to read them for you today. But some ways to describe what happens to Satan. If you're going, well, how did Satan, how did this happen? One of the places is in the Old Testament, Isaiah 14, particularly verses 12 through 15. It tells us that Satan was an angel. Okay? And this gets weird. It feels like folklore and myth and legend. But God actually created these heavenly angels with authority to respond in different dimensions, and with power, all to use for God's glory. But one of the things that's really unique about God and his security is that he gave angels, he gave human beings complete soul freedom, right? Like can't force your child to love you. God didn't want to force people to respond to him, and so he created for the purpose of unity and community and to be with his creation that he created, but he gave them soul freedom. And one of these people was, one of these angels was Satan, who basically said, I like my plan better than yours. That's called sin. And so pride swelled up in Satan, and he decided that he would have things his own way. And see, this is where it goes, I can't believe that. That's all weird. And I go, I'm not asking you to understand how it all happened, but can we just admit that there is something at play that's greater than life and goodness, and there's something in our world that just comes up out of more than just people's choice that's evil, and this is what the Bible describes as how that happened. And now a couple things ago, his name's Satan. He's the evil one. But the other thing we got to know is he was a created spiritual being who rebelled against God. He lies and slanders in order, for one thing, to separate us from God. And the third thing is, and this is very important, he's a defeated enemy. He'll be destroyed in the end. Colossians 2 would be a place you can see that. Revelation 20 would be another place where it literally talks about how one of the things that people get confused about is are God and Satan equals? Is they're just good and bad? We're going to define good and bad, but they're not equals, and the Bible tells us there will be a day where all that will get reconciled, and we'll kind of wrap up with that as you see it. But this isn't like God and Satan are deities that kind of respond in equal ways. No, God is stronger. God is omnipotent. He is all-powerful. He's omniscient. He's all places. Satan's not that way. So you go, well, how in the world does he affect us? Well, about a third of angels that God created, they actually followed Satan into this deep, dark despair and pride. And so they're literally at war here, and they don't have the power to do the same things God does, but they do have the ability to manipulate and slander. And so the way that I describe it is, I love counseling. I spend a lot of time in a counseling office. I'm so intrigued by how broken I am and trying to figure all that stuff out and trying to own it in whatever way I can. And what I'm always really drawn to is the brilliance of counselors in terms of how they understand how I work and how I mess up things and all that kind of stuff. So if you're to take a well-educated counselor who has lots of time working with an individual, now take that and extend it over 6,000 years, 10,000 years, whatever number you want to put. And imagine what that person with that kind of counselor's insight would be able to do in terms of understand a person and help manipulate them if they decided to do that. Well, Satan has that ability to be able to dangle things in front of you and define things and tell you things. It looks a lot like the first lie in the Bible, which is, eat from this tree, God doesn't want you to eat it because you'll be like him, like that kind of thing. That there's this false bait that just hangs there, and then you don't see the hook, you just see the bait. And so that's how kind of Satan would respond, and so you see those things. And so here's one of the things I just want to point out real quick before we finish up with the rest of this passage. So when we think about this, we go, uh-oh, well, Satan's really bad, the devil's really bad, and then now this is where we go, okay, let's define all problems to Satan. Right? No, I couldn't do it. I didn't hit my spouse. Satan did. No, that's not at all how it works. In fact, there's this really great book written in the 1600s, Puritan writer, that Tim Keller pointed this out, and his name's Richard Baxter, and he wrote a book called Melancholy. But the book, that word, especially in the 1600s, was kind of synonymous with depression, and so he wrote a book about Christian depression. And so he actually explained the 4 reasons by which Christians or people experience depression. And here's what he said. Some of the reason you experience depression is actually a physical cause, right? You're getting enough sleep, you're not eating very well, your body's in pain, and there's some solutions to that, right? Some of it's medicine, right? There are chemical imbalances that people have in their brain, and there's some medicine that helps that. There are infections in your body that antibiotics actually do help, and so some of the ways you respond to physical depression are your medicine, food, rest. So he explained some of that, that's not the enemy, that's not Satan, that's just the reality of what's going on with us physically, and there's ways to respond, right? Another one would be psychological. There are some places where we feel empty and alone, and what's interesting in terms of that depression, the solution for that is always love, affirmation, and support. So if that's where it's going on, hey, I just feel really alone. Now, I point this out, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, the opposite of addiction is actually connection. If you think about why people are addicted, some people are bent towards that, but when addiction gets to its highest level, it always happens alone. You drink alone, you hide the bottle, you hide the pill, right? It is something about this loneliness that you now feel, and that the solution that they're finding in sobriety is actually the long, arduous work of being in community. And so some of this is going, psychological, then there's some love, affirmation, support you need. Others is moral. Some of the reasons that you feel depression and stuff is based on some experience in your life. If you're in the middle of an affair, it's probably hard to really thrive in your family, in your home life. So that's not, Satan in charge. No, there are some things in our life that we choose that actually that lead us to a place of brokenness, right? And so, you get some guilt, some anger and shame that rise up in that. And the only solution to that is confession and repentance. That's the solution to that. You got those three, and then Baxter talked about the fourth, which he would call demonic. And you go, this isn't because I'm not sleeping or not eating. This isn't because I'm not in community. This isn't because I have all this secret sin in my life. And you go, that oppression and that guilt and that weight and all those things that you feel is actually a result of this fourth piece, which is demonic. So if you're going, how do we figure out if what's going on in my life is actually something that Satan's doing? Okay, let's walk through it. Okay, do you have something that you need to confess and repent of? Is there something you need to do with your body to help it feel better? Is there something you need to do in terms of connecting with other people? If you're doing all those things, then the reality is what you are facing is beyond your power and your control. And therefore we have to go, well, what do we do with that? Well, luckily, verse 13, Paul tells us what to do with it. Here's what he says. Therefore, as a result of the battle you're in, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything, to stand. So he's going, okay, this is good. Or when you experience this, you go, aha, now I understand what this is. Now I can put a name to the experience that we're facing in our world. Now I can put a name to this oppression my family is feeling. This isn't about my behavior. This must be, therefore, about something that's going on with the enemy. And so what Paul says do, when you can identify that, your next step is to stand your ground. So this is important because if you think about Roman soldiers and their armor, all the protection was on the front. All the protection on the front. Meaning if you turn and flee, you're actually more vulnerable than if you would stand your ground and face what's coming. So literally what Paul's saying is don't turn around, don't flee, don't run. If you are experiencing oppression or battle in your life, in our world, we don't go, we flee from it, we go. We got to stand our ground and stand firm in Jesus' power. Now verse 14 is what it says. Stand firm then. And then he gives us some descriptions. With the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place. And so this is where we get caught up in all the armor. It's going, no. Don't pay attention to the armor. Pay attention to the description of what the armor is for. See this? It says the belt of truth buckled around your waist, and the breastplate of righteousness in place. So he's going, there are two tactics and two defenses that we have to face. The first one is truth. The second one is righteousness. And here's what this tells us. If it tells you what you're guarding, if you have a bulletproof vest on, then what you're protecting against is gunshots. Follow me? So if you have a bulletproof vest on, what you're protecting yourself from is a gunshot. And so what it's saying is you need two different things. You need a truth buckled around your waist. And other things you go, the belt holds everything together. Don't want to get caught up in that. Just want to point out the two things. Truth and righteousness. And here's why. Because there's two ways that the enemy lies to you and slanders you and affects you. And here's the two things. He either says this, you're not good enough. Ever got that one? Ever worry that someone in your life is going to find out that you're not good enough? So the enemy reminds you all the time, see, if people really knew you, how in the world could a God like you? So the first way that they do it is you're not good enough. Or the second one, which is kind of the flip side, which is you deserve better. You work so hard, you deserve to take a week off from your marriage and your life. Man, you've had such a hard week. You deserve to be able to escape from that. You didn't deserve that pleasure. So on one side, there's this idea that you're not good enough, this lie that you're not good enough, and the reality is that righteousness kind of resolves that for us. Righteousness literally says that while you're not good enough, God actually makes you righteous by what he did, right? So you go, you're not good enough, that's a shot at your value. But what righteousness says is that the way by which your value is defined is that God of the universe paid the price for you, meaning your value is what someone's willing to pay for you, and the creator of the universe paid for you, right? And then the truth piece of going, you deserve better. Well, this gets hard, but the reality is you don't deserve better. Like I always joke about this, but I can't stand when our kiddos talk about it's not fair. Because I'm always like, we don't want fairness in our world. Because if we all got fairness, we have all turned our back on God, stuck our middle finger up at God, and said we like our plan better than his. And fairness means we get to experience the ramifications and the consequences for that. So on one side, we're not good enough, but yet we're righteous before God. On the other side is we don't really deserve better. The very best we get is a free gift from God. So it says stand firm with righteousness. And so he's going, here's what you got to know. Here's how the enemy attacks. He told you you're not good enough. And when you hear that, you go, no, I am. Because Jesus died for me. Or that you deserve better. Oh, I don't really deserve better. The only thing I deserve is eternal disconnection from God. So everything that he decides to give me is actually his gift to me. So both sides of that, that's how the enemy fights. And then he continues, and this is pretty important, in verse 15. He says, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. Remember, we go, who are we fighting? How does the enemy fight? And now the question is, how do we fight back? Right, what's our defense? And with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. So I heard this thing as I was thinking about this again last night, and I was going, I've always heard about soldiers in war sleeping with their boots on. Have you heard that? Like literally, when you are in war territory. And so I called a friend, Tom Gonzalez. He goes to church here, so his wife's the one who does the announcements. He was in the Marines, which yesterday was the birthday. This is Veterans Day, so what a really great time to think about this. But in those times of war, Marines did, because they were right in the middle, but they literally slept with their boots on. In other words, they were always ready. They were prepared. They were prepared for war. They were prepared for whatever would come in the middle of the night, right? And so you got the same imagery here for the soldier. Literally, Paul's going, and with your feet fitted with readiness, he's going, no, you got to be ready for this. You got to be ready. You got to stand firm. You got to be ready. You got to be ready. And then it says this comes with the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. So what he's saying here is going, no, listen. There is an enemy, and you got to stand firm with readiness. But then he gives us a hint of what kind of readiness we have to have, and he calls it the gospel. The gospel of peace. The gospel that transcends the evil of this world. The gospel that allows us to sleep and rest even though our world's broken. That word peace, the word shalom, and the Old Testament means it invades every part of our life where we find peace and contentment no matter what the circumstances. And so what Paul is saying is, even in the midst of all this, when you put on this, when you remind yourself of who you are, the truth of that, and the righteousness that comes from Jesus, then you stand firm, and your weapon here is the gospel. And he's the gospel truth. So let me just remind you in 2 minutes what the gospel is. The gospel is this. Creation, right? The gospel is all of us were created in his image. So when you have this thought that, man, I was created to do something really significant, really incredible, that I go, yep, that comes from God. And even the gospel explains how we got here. No matter what science does, it goes, okay, maybe there was this big bang, something you kind of hit together, and all of a sudden life happened. You go, well, what created the things that bang together? Right? There's nothing, and there's something. And the best explanation for that, all the way across the board, is that there's something greater than us that created us. And then you go, why in the world would that something better than us create us? And the only solution that we can come up with that makes any plausible sense is that he wanted to be in relationship with us, right? You had kids. And the reason you did is not because you thought, oh, life's going to be so easy, they're going to cut the grass, they're never going to fight, they don't cost us any money. No, you knew it was going to be a pain. You knew it was going to be exhausting, and yet you're still so glad you did it. Why? Because you literally wanted to be in relationship with your children, and you knew one day they would no longer be children, but they were going to be adults. You're raising an adult, and you're going to be in a relationship with them. And so God created us. That's the beginning of the gospel, is that he created us to be in relationship with us, which always leads to the next question. Well, then why don't we feel connected to the Creator? Aha! And here's why. Because we have all fallen. We've all chosen our own path over God's path. We have all fallen. We've all turned our back on God. We've all said we like our plan better than God's. Tom Keller explains it this way. When you spend your entire life saying, God, I want nothing to do with you. I don't believe you exist. I don't care if you exist. I just want to be left alone from you. So God says eventually, if you do that long enough, you get your wish. That's what hell is. It's eternal disconnection from God. So he created us, and we fell. We fell so far and so deep, there's no way we can get back in connection with God. And so in our mind, that's where this whisper from the enemy goes, you're not loved. God doesn't really love you. He doesn't really love you. He has nothing to do with you. He's disappointed in you. And we feel that and go, okay, well, I guess we just choose our own life and go after our own ways. I guess this world is so bleak and dark, and there's so much despair. The best thing I can do is either escape it or bring that same misery to everybody else I interact with. Hence, terror and hate and all those things. And so you go, well, all of us feel this need to be connected to the Creator, but we all know that no matter how hard we try, we can't fix all those things. Which leads to the third part, in my opinion, the most important part of the gospel. redemption. This is the story of what God does for us. He literally saw us in our deepest and our darkest despair, and he showed up on this planet, and he reached out and he redeemed us. He made all things new. He reached out and saw us as his and called us his children and welcomed us back into the family. Right? And so we were created in his image, and we know, gosh, there's something we're supposed to do in this world, but we can't achieve it. Right? And the reason being is we're broken and flawed. And yet God, in his loving and his grace, he actually reached out to us and met us while we were still sinners. Christ died for us. When we were at our very worst, God gave us his very best in Jesus. And so literally, he redeemed us. But that's not the end. Because that was it. You would discover that, and God would just beam you right up into heaven and not have to live in the misery of this world. But you see, there's a plan that God had that the enemy thwarted and led us all astray. So God is redeeming it. Not just so we can be saved, but so that we can actually participate in the restoration of this planet. So we go, God actually calls us to bring this good news everywhere we go so that he can radically transform us. And we can actually fight evil with this gospel of peace, which is we were created, we all failed, God redeemed us so that we could live our life back the way you want to. See, there's things that you are created for that no one else in this world can do the way that you can do. God gave you gifts that no one else has. But you see, this brokenness in your life has convinced you that your life doesn't matter. You can't really do anything. But the reality is, no. You can't do it on your own, but God redeemed you. And they'll invite you back into actually making this world. So basically it says, the gospel from the gospel of peace. Now verse 16 says, in addition to all of this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil ones. So he's going, you see, you have to actually stand behind this for the rest of your life. This gospel of peace, it's your shield. When the enemy tells you you're not special, that's not true, because God doesn't make any jump. When the enemy tells you that you are broken, you go, yes, I am. We all are. And yet God still redeemed me. You're not good enough. You're right, I'm not good enough, but guess who is? And he cleansed me. He made me right before him, and then he now all invites me back into his life. So literally when Paul's talking about this shield, he's going, it's the gospel of peace. Could you actually put faith in this? And I go, what else would you put faith in? That a couple atoms bang together and we're all here kind of for no reason? Because that doesn't explain evil. But this does explain evil. But it doesn't give us any hope. And you're going, really? This whole thing is because some creator just wanted us all to murder each other and live in misery? No. He actually wanted to redeem us. When Jesus prayed, the prayer that you all knew if you grew up in any kind of church, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. His goal was to restore us. And then it continues with this. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Finally, all we've been talking about is these defensive mechanisms by which we stand firm and just fight off the enemy. And now we get an offensive method, an offensive weapon. And that's what it says. The sword of the Spirit, which is the Word. So the reality is, what I just told you was what 66 books of the Bible combined walks through. This is it. So when the enemy does this, you don't just stand behind the shield and let it protect you. No, you bring this shield out and you declare its truth wherever you possibly can. Right? And so this is our offensive weapon. This is what every person struggling with evil has to hear. You were created to do something special. And the reason you feel so broken is you're so disconnected from God, just like I was. And then God, at my very worst, redeemed me and now invites me into a life that matters. God saved my marriage and invite me into a place where I can now help other marriages. God saved my family and invite me to help shape families. God saved me from addiction and now invited me in to help other people with addiction. And so the reality is this now no longer is just our defense. This is our offense. This is where it says in Revelation 12, the enemy is defeated by the blood of the Lamb, meaning the redemption that Jesus did for us, and the word of people's testimonies. This story of God's work in us is our offensive weapon. And in verse 18, he gives some kind of ponder, and this is what we're going to finish up, and the band's going to come up, and this is what he says. And pray in the Spirit on all occasions, with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. So Paul goes, hey, as you put this on, and you think about righteousness and truth, that God tells you you're loved, and you are loved more than you can ever imagine. You're redeemed more than we deserve. And then when you do those things, when that enemy comes, and even when that doesn't work, even when you're still struggling, here's what you do. You just pray. You admit to God that you don't understand all this. You admit to God that you can't figure out why our world's so broken. You admit to God that there is something going on in our world that you cannot comprehend. You admit to God that you're struggling. You admit to God you can't sleep. You admit to God that there are parts of your life that don't match up to the way that you want to live. You admit to that. Here's what happens as you do that. It firms up your belief that there is a God who hears you and restores you and is involved in your life. And then you know what else you do? And it says, with this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. So you don't just do that for yourself. You do it for everyone. So it just makes sense as we deal with the brokenness of our world that we pause for a second and we pray for the evil that our world is experiencing right now. And then we will stand firm and declare that the enemy doesn't have a hold on us, that we belong to God and He redeemed us and He welcomed us into it. Then we'll sing. So we're just going to pause for a second. And we're going to pray for our world. We're going to pray for the fires in California. We're going to pray for our lost children. We're going to pray for our worst enemies, and we're just going to pray. And we're going to confess to God that we can't fix things and we can't solve things and we don't know how it all works, but that He does. And that He defeats evil, and we know one day He will win, and we'll ask Him to make that day sooner rather than later. And so we'll pray, and then we'll sing. So would you not spectate, not just listen to this prayer, but would you talk to God? And some of you are going, well, I don't believe in God. How about tell you? Just tell him you don't believe him. Just tell him that you don't believe He's good. Don't tell him that you don't believe He's there. Then say, God, if you are, why don't you show up? Our God is big enough. He's not afraid of those things. And so just to challenge you to do that, so would you pause with me for just a second as we pray. Oh, Jesus. I can't imagine the terror people felt a few nights ago in that bar. I can't imagine the terror in Las Vegas or in schools. I just can't imagine it, God. And boy, Lord, that seems to be the way that people point and say, there is no good, there is no God, and yet, Lord, you redeem all things, and you are good stewards of all things. And so, God, we just confess it's hard for us to understand, but we believe you're good. So, God, with this gospel of truth, with this message, would it, at peace, just penetrate our heart. And, God, in every interaction we have, whether that's with our school teachers, whether that's with our neighbors, whether that's with our co-workers, God, will we not see them as the enemy? God, will we see them as someone you love, that you called according to your purpose, that you created to experience the good of life? And God, will we start to see that? And God, in any way that we can, God, would you allow us to be a part of the restoration of our world? We don't even know how to respond to what's going on in California with fires. Would you speak to us there? And how to respond with the brokenness of evil in our world. Would you give us clarity? And God, would you allow us to stand firm in your truth and your righteousness? And we declare so boldly that we belong to you and that the enemy can't take what we have because we belong to you, and we pray these things in your name, Jesus. Amen. Would you stand with me as we conclude the service? work in children's ministry in the next service, you can't be friendly out there. You got to go get them. Okay? Yeah, they've been in there for like 90 minutes. That's a long time. Our children's workers are like they are divine, but they're done with your kids now. And so go get them. And second thing is we just talking about prayers, and you're going, well, I can't even pray right now. I feel so oppressed. And you go, let us help you with that. Look for someone to pray with you. We got a prayer room over here to my right. And then if you can just come right down front, we'd be happy to pray with you and do life with you there. Third thing, you already heard about Wednesday, so I won't tell you anything about that. On your way out, the next service starts in 6 minutes. So there's going to be people coming in, which means we got 400 folks here who are just going to be greeters for us. So put on your smiley face, say hello to the people as you all get out, and stay as long as you want to. There's going to be plenty of coffee. Other than that, you're dismissed. You have a great week.